Welcome to the Blue Suede Lounge, everybody. We like to call this our little after party.
That's right. Hey, baby.
Hey, baby. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is you're listening to this podcast. We really appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. And this is our new thing. We want to have the little after show where we get to kind of extend maybe one of the radio shows we've done and you know, talk more in detail about one of the topics. And,
That's right. It's all about life, love, and Elvis.
Right, exactly. And we just did a show all based on the R&B and the soulful side of Elvis and his relationship with the African American community, both in the music part of it and as far as the relationship part of it, because there's been a lot of misconceptions out there.
Right.
There's been a lot of lies. There's been a lot of rumors, and we here at Blue Suede Connection like to set the record straight and let people know what really went on, the way things really went down.
Now, how could a little boy, I mean, if you go back to Elvis's childhood, I mean, born and raised for the first, I can't remember. I think it was like 13 or so before he went to Memphis, right?
Yeah.
So for those first 10, 12 years, he's right there in Tupelo, the heart of the South, and literally living walking distance from Shake Rag, right over the railroad tracks into the black community.
Right.
And played with little black kids.
Well, when you're a child, there is no such thing as color.
No.
There's no barrier
It's
there.
the best thing about kids.
You're kids.
Yeah.
So he is this little 12, 13-year-old kid playing with little kids, white, black, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he would also, like we said, go across the tracks. That's where he heard the music, and that's where he was exposed to that.
Yeah, you don't know. It's the best thing about children that I wish adults could acquire at an older age is they don't know until some adult says something rude to them.
Right.
Well, you playing with that little black boy, why are you doing that? That they go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly.
They don't know.
No.
And Elvis went to their churches. He'd sneak in. He'd hang out with all the children. They were all in the same poverty-stricken situation.
Yeah.
Color meant nothing when you're starving.
No.
You
And on the music side of it, I remember years ago, a guy that you and I, like I said, once again, have grown a great respect for was Tom Petty. I remember him saying on this topic, he goes, Elvis was the first real ambassador of rock and roll and R&B music. He was kind of like the guy that kind of, well, as we know, opened the door and kind of welcomed everybody and, hey, we're all in this together kind of thing,
Right.
And he was a great representation of that. But it really is unfair, over the years, how that rumor has just flown around. And I've had many conversations with people of different colors, and talked about it. And a lot of times I would have to explain that, hey, this is not true. And then I would turn a lot of folks.
They bring it up. Yeah.
Elvis was a racist. Yeah, he didn't like blacks. And this is so untrue.
Yeah.
So untrue.
Exactly.
And again, that's why we did that whole show on Blue Suede Connection. And that's why we're continuing the conversation today.
Right. And like he said, we quoted him in the show last week where he said, people think that I started this business.
Right.
And I did not start this business. The black community has been doing this music for long before me.
Yeah.
He said. He was quoted to say that.
And it was called rhythm and blues when it first came out.
Yeah, I guess rhythm and blues. Yeah, before somebody coined rock and roll.
Until Alan Freed came out with the term rock and roll.
Right.
Exactly. Because Fats was playing the stuff before rock and roll really hit
Richard,
big. Yeah. Rufus Thomas,
B.B.
King, all of them.
Yeah, they were all doing this kind of music. They were all playing on Beale Street. Elvis was soaking it all up. You know?
Well, BB was there in the beginning. I mean, he knew Elvis when Elvis was still that young, pimply-faced kid sneaking into Sun Records there and trying to make it big.
Right.
And he said Elvis would stand there and watch him and watch them play blues and stuff. They said he didn't ask a lot of questions, but he was just soaking it all up.
In fact, we've got a quote here from David Porter. Now, he was in Stax, correct?
He was a producer at Stax Records where Elvis did some great music.
Let's stop for a second and take a listen to what David Porter's got to say.
Elvis was able to bring a value to the presentation of black music, African American artists, at a period that they were being ignored by the greater artists in a credible way because he learned it from the source.
Yeah, and B.B. King said he was dynamic. His phraseology, his way of looking at a song was as unique as Sinatra's. He says, I was a tremendous fan, and if Elvis had lived, there's just no end to his inventions of what he could have done.
Right.
As far as music. A Buddy Guy, an amazing blues artist who's still around today. He said, Elvis was my friend, and he was the king of rock and roll.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so, and all these guys.
He was very respected.
Absolutely.
I mean, as well as, I suppose, there was jealousy.
Yeah.
But in reality, Elvis did rhythm and blues a really big favor.
He did.
Because he opened the door by crossing those racial lines. I mean, for
Right.
a while, people didn't even know Elvis was white.
Yeah,
They thought he was black.
And a lot of people were just very confused. What is he?
What
What is
And
he?
even Elvis talked about that.
Yeah.
What's that? What is he? Is
What
he?
is he? Who is he? What is he? Is he? Is he? Yeah.
Yeah, he makes jokes of that on stage.
But
so.
two of the biggest R&B and soul artists in music are Al Green and Isaac Hayes, and both had this to say. First, Al Green, he said, he broke the ice for all of us. Mm-hmm. And it was Isaac Hayes who said Elvis was a giant and influenced everybody in the business.
Right.
Now, that comes from two of your biggest R&B artists right there who had that to say, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a break really quick, and we'll be right back to talk about more of this in just a second. Don't leave the lounge. Get yourself your coffee, your beverage of choice, and hang with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, Hank.
Yes?
Elvis or the Beatles?
Well, dang it, that's like asking charcoal or propane. Elvis, for goodness sakes.
Dan and TL here, and we want to invite you to come visit our website. Stay updated on all things Elvis.
And shop.
Catch up on our growing list of affiliates joining from all over the globe.
And shop.
Learn about your host, like yours truly.
And shop.
Yes, TL, shop. New and recommended Elvis products every day direct from our site.
That's what I'm talking about. Visit BlueSuedeConnection.com.
Shop. We are your Blue Suede Connection. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Rockabilly Hall of Fame, the Pop Music Hall of Fame, the Mississippi Hall of Fame, and on the topic of today, the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. They're just a couple of those Hall of Fames that Elvis is inducted into, but I'm glad he did make it into the R&B Hall of Fame.
That's right.
He
Wow,
was
had a
accepted
lot
by
of-
that community that they put him in that Hall of Fame,
Exactly.
which is pretty cool stuff if you ask me.
Yeah, what do you think Elvis himself thought about it? Like, do you think he thought, wow, I did something really amazing?
I hope so. I hope in some way he realized how important he was. I think he how could you not?
Right.
I mean, he got, even though the Academy Awards and the Grammys and all those folks didn't give him
No.
a lot of
my
attention
gosh.
like he deserved, but the fans did, and his peers like Isaac Hayes and those folks, B.B. King.
Times
They
were
talk to him.
different back then too.
Yeah.
Like, do you watch the Grammys now? And it's like everybody's getting a Grammy.
Yeah, for
They're
anything.
like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think, my gosh, Elvis only got like how many Grammys? 2, 3?
Yeah.
And now it's like you have one Grammy show, Madonna gets like 12 in one show. You're
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
I know, it's just amazing. It was like back then in the day, it was much harder for these accolades. I think.
A lot of his peers are folks that influenced him, all had good things to say. Rufus Thomas spoke well of him. That was one of his major influences because he was a Memphis boy there, too,
Right. Yeah.
B.B. King also, Muddy Waters, Arthur Big Boy Crudup. Blues guitarist, I understand, Elvis loved blues guitarist Lonnie Williams. He's
Oh,
a big
really?
fan of his. And Junior
Okay.
Parker, of course, there's pictures of him with Junior Parker. And Big Mama Thornton. He loved all those folks, and they all inspired him. And I think that we shared this little quote by Elvis, too, on that part of him that liked this kind of music. He said, rhythm is either something you have or you don't have, but when you do, you have it all over. And he just had that, if you don't see him, you don't know he's white, and like B.B. King said, or James Brown, music has no color. Soul has no color.
Soul has no color. Yep.
And you don't see Elvis, but he just had rhythm. He had soul. As we talked about earlier, he went across the tracks. He understood it.
Right.
He understood what it meant to put your feelings into a song.
Right.
And that he did get from the black community. But a little black kid could walk into the white community and listen to a country song and get it too and understand it.
Yeah.
It's the way it's music. It's not a color.
Right.
A little Asian kid could walk into a blues club and get it, and have it. If you've got that natural instinct, it's part of you. And not to mention, Elvis grew up very poor, like those folks in Shake Rag that he went over to see.
Right.
He understood what it was to be hungry. He understood what it was to only have one shirt or two pair of pants and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah.
So he could relate. He totally understood it. So it was very easy for him to express himself in music. And once again, he had that natural rhythm. So that's
So now, what do you think about, this is just going one step a little deeper. So
Okay.
Elvis had this group of guys hanging around him. Do you think
Yes.
the guys got it?
some
Do you think
of them.
they understood what he was doing? Or do you think they were just along for the ride? And I mean, do you like,
That's a tough
I know
one.
it's kind of an off-Broadway
I
topic.
think
but
some of them got it. Some did, maybe, and some didn't. You know,
I think if they were a musician, they
Yes.
like I think Charlie got it.
right. Oh, Charlie
For sure.
definitely, and
Yeah.
I think Red did because
And Red did, I think.
Red
yeah.
was in that documentary that
Right.
HBO did a while back, and he totally got it, I think. And, you know, we've shared this story on the show, too. Myrna Smith, one of the things that she said is when they first took the gig with him in 1969, the Sweet Inspirations' whole thought pattern was like, you know, he's rockabilly. He does blue suede shoes and hound dog. How in the heck is us soulful girls going to fit in with Elvis? But they said the day they walked in, and Myrna said she saw the orchestra. She saw the TCB band. She saw the Imperials. She said every type of musician and music was there.
Yep.
And she goes, oh, I get it now. And the girls right away
Right.
fell right into place with them, and it just worked like magic, she said, right away. And it was like,
Exactly. So speaking of Myrna, I've got a clip of her. Let's listen to Myrna for a second.
When we first decided to take the gig with Elvis, we had no idea that there would be any racial flat regarding it. Our first racial encounter was when we went to Texas. Elvis was told by his people that, well, you can leave the black girls home. You don't have to bring them. So Elvis wasn't going to do the Astrodome unless his girls could be with him. And he demanded that we be given the star treatment. We had to be in our convertible where everybody could see us, and our little blonde could drive us. And that was his statement. You don't like it? Deal with it, or I'm not going to be there. And I thought that was very big of him.
very good.
I love that. Deal with
can-
it, or I'm not going to be
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I love that.
He didn't have to say a lot, you know, his actions.
And I
you know.
love that they had a little white blonde
Yeah.
driving him around. That's awesome. That's just like Elvis. Yeah, I'll take her to drive my girls
And you know, the
around.
Inspirations had to get a kick out of it.
Yeah,
because
and this
they,
is Texas at the time we're talking.
because
you know?
they weren't feeling the love to begin with, being there. So I guess when Elvis did that, they must have ate that up in the back
Yeah,
of the convertible,
exactly.
riding around waving at everybody. And but you know, the type of musicians he surrounded himself says a lot too.
Yeah.
They all loved him. Everybody that worked with him loved him. And
I've never heard anybody actually who worked with him for any extended period say anything bad about him, to be honest.
Right,
Can you
yeah.
think of anything?
no. And Elvis, once again, he never forgot where he came from. And
I mean, not counting like Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh,
or
no,
something,
no.
Who did really work with him, but toured with him off and on. But
Yeah.
Jerry's a little bit different.
right. Well, we've talked about Little Richard a lot, you know, in the
Oh, I
past.
love
and-
Little Richard.
and,
I love him.
We've covered this a million times on the show, but, you know, Little Richard would get a little upset when certain artists would cover his songs.
Right.
But the one person who didn't upset him so much was Elvis, because there's two reasons we said. Number one, Elvis did it right. Elvis had that soul, he had that rhythm, so he could do
He
Tutti
could do
Frutti.
it. He could do justice to the
And
song.
number two, by Elvis doing it, it opened up the door for Richard, for kids to say, I want to hear Little Richard's version too, you know,
Right.
and
yeah, and Richard made a lot of money.
Yeah, and-
he liked money
yeah.
back then. Yeah,
yeah.
but the old Little Richard was funny too. He had
Yeah.
his way of putting the audience in their place.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
that.
shut
stuff.
up.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
he'd say something funny and the audience would laugh. Say shut up.
But he loved
So
Elvis.
funny.
He loved Elvis a lot. In fact, I think I have a little quote over here. One of the many quotes by Little Richard was, "Elvis was a God-given. There is no explanation. He was an integrator,"
Yeah,
which
nice.
is goes along with what we're talking about today.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, we're going to take another little break, and first we're going to hear what Nancy Sinatra has to say about it, and then we'll be right back.
One of my all-time heroes and icons is Elvis Presley. You know, I
Oh,
like
me
to,
too.
And I know you guys were real good friends. Tell me about Elvis. Can you tell me anything about him? Because I don't
You
get to
mean-
meet that many people who knew Elvis. Yeah.
Sweet and fidgety. He would always be moving, either his foot
I'm fidgety
or
too.
his fingers.
Yes. I'm like
too?
the king in many ways.
Yeah.
In that I fidget occasionally. He was pretty much, he was a real person to you then, you know?
Real
Because the rest
person.
of us, he's become, or people like me, he's become this sort of icon. You don't think of him as being a real person who was fidgety or liked a certain kind of cigar.
Really? Well, yeah, and he called me the night his daughter was born, and he was very melancholy, and he said, I feel sorry for all the other babies who are being born tonight, the ones who are not privileged. He was especially worried about the little black children, he said, because he thought that they wouldn't have the advantages that his baby would have growing up.
Yeah, he sounds like a nice guy, actually.
Very nice guy.
Millions believe in the power of prayer. What if God finally answered? What if he sent you your own personal angel? And what if that angel was Elvis Presley?
Honey, if you're going to sit there and stare at me, I might as well go to bed.
Eternal Flame, a novel by Patricia Garber, available on Amazon.
You know, Elvis wasn't Bob Dylan.
Right.
He didn't try to get real deep in messages in his songs. But if you look at some of the things he chose, and Elvis, once again, too, if you remember the Madison Square Garden press conference, when they tried to get him to commit on certain beliefs and feelings about
Right.
things, he was very, very careful about that. But his
Exactly.
choice of songs here and there says a lot. And 3 songs that come to mind are In the Ghetto, If I Can Dream, and Walk a Mile in My Shoes.
Oh, I love that song.
3
Yeah.
songs that right there kind of give you a little idea of who he was when it came to those kinds of things. And
Right.
I know that Elvis was a huge, huge Dr. Martin Luther King fan.
Oh, absolutely. He was devastated
Yeah.
when Martin Luther King passed away there in Memphis. He was assassinated.
He had the books.
Oh, man.
He could quote speeches. Mm-hmm. And when Dr. King was shot and killed in Memphis, it devastated Elvis. And they were on the
sure
set
did.
of Love a Little, Live a Little, I believe.
Right.
When that
Live
happened.
a little, love a
Live
little.
a
You always say that
Live a
backwards.
little, love a little.
I love
yeah.
that about you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're consistent.
Yeah, always. But anyway, he was devastated, and I think he stood
Yeah,
up and
he
sang a
was.
hymn. And
He said, if you don't mind, I need to stand up and
Mm-hmm.
express myself. And he started to sing some gospel music
Yeah.
while he was watching the news. Yeah.
so that's
A cappella.
Yeah, and that's why at the end of the '68 comeback special, when he sat down with Bender or as Bindle, as Parker called him, Elvis said, "I'd like to say something about the times. I would like to give something to the people, let them know where I stand." And he sat down with the songwriters, and that's when they came up with "If I Can Dream," which is kind of loosely based on Martin Luther King and then
Right.
Bobby Kennedy's death also and all that. And Elvis had a lot to say in that song.
Right.
So maybe next time you hear that song, you'll hear it a different way and understand where he was really, really deeply coming from.
Right. You know, it's really interesting, too, the recording of that If I Can Dream song because of how Elvis decided to record it. And they waited for all the stagehands and everybody to leave. And it was
Right.
just Elvis and the guys, you know, Bender and whoever was on the soundboard. He had him turn all the lights off.
All right?
And he sang it in the dark.
Yeah.
And somebody said, and I can't remember if it was Bender who said it, that when the lights came back on again, Elvis was actually on the floor. He'd been on the floor on the. Now that last note's like really intense. To think he was hitting that note while he was laying out is amazing.
Right, yeah.
Because, you know, there's breathing techniques there, and
Sure.
which you would think that standing up would be a better way to get that note.
Absolutely.
But he
But
was laid out.
He nailed it. He nailed it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, you know, and let's go back to the beginning, too, with this. You know, Elvis had to know when he was recording Lawdy Miss Claudie and Tutti Frutti and all these R&B songs that it was going to cause a little flack.
Oh, sure.
He lived in the South. He knew about racism. He knew how it all existed, but he didn't care. And
No.
that's what I like about him, that he just did it anyway. He did what he felt like.
Right.
Reconsider Baby, you know, one of my favorite Elvis songs ever. What other white kid's going to sing something like that back then? He loved it. He said, I'm going to sing it. And
Right.
and that, I think, says a lot, too.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I hope everybody's enjoyed hanging with us today.
And we want to hear back. We want feedback from you. We want to hear what you guys
Absolutely.
think. If you have feelings on what we talked about today or on any other podcast.
Elvis fans from all over the world, we do hear from people from,
Yes.
geez, just about every country, it seems like.
Some we can't even pronounce.
Exactly. Everybody loves Elvis like we do.
I don't have to say same bat time, same bat channel over here because this can be listened to anytime, right?
Exactly.
We'll see you in the next podcast, everybody. Thank you for being part of the After Party Lounge.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And hit that notification bell.
We are your Blue Suede Connection.